This is Talking Drupal, a bi-weekly chat about web design and development by a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. We record this live on Wednesday afternoons in a Google Hangout. Visit us at TalkingDrupal.com. This is episode 111, January 7th, 2016. Views Revisited. Hey, guys.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Views Revisited, Part 2.
Yeah, and the title of the show is so funny because it's revisited, really. Because we started to record this show last week and had some technical problems halfway through the show and had to start again this week. So this is our second visit on the revisit, right?
I think so.
It's like Groundhog Day.
Exactly. So I guess we should start again by saying Happy New Year. Did we say that last week? Or no, we were in between Christmas and New Year's last week. So Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So joining me as usual is John Picozzi from Oomph. And John, we're recording on a Thursday, so I see you're in the office today.
I am in the office, in our Providence office, and it's lovely but cold outside. It got real cold over the last couple of days.
It did. We're finally seeing the winter temperatures come in. So how did you spend your New Year's?
Really uneventfully, actually. Didn't really do much anything. Watched the TV and hung out with the family, and that was about it.
That's good. Those are nice New Year's, just like that. How about you, Nick? Nick Laughlin from Enlightened Design.
Good afternoon.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry. No, I made the mistake the first time. It's Enlightened Development.
Correct, and I didn't even notice. I need to start paying more attention. We went over a couple friends' house. There's a Colombian tradition where you have, right before the New Year's, eat 12 grapes and make 12 wishes, and it's a bit of a challenge not to choke.
Say that again. You do what?
You eat 12 grapes and make a wish for each one for the next year.
12 grapes at one time?
No, one at a time. But you have to do it. So
why would you be choking?
Because you have to do it in about a minute. So you have to do it very quickly. Most people start it and then finish after a couple of but it's a nice little tradition. And I'm looking forward to next week going to Vegas for a much needed vacation. It's been a long time.
Well, that's great.
Hey, if your wife can't go with you, I'd be more than happy to stand in.
She'll be there. So but if not, I'd let you know.
All right. Well, so my New Year's was uneventful as well. Went out for dinner with some friends that we've spent the last probably 15 years with on New Year's. Went for dinner and came back to my house, played a few games, and celebrated the ball dropping at 12. So pretty much the same thing I do every year.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so it was fun. So here we are in the new year. We got some exciting things going on at Talking Drupal. First, I want to remind people that we do have a webinar on Tuesday. That's Tuesday the 12th, coming up at 12 p.m. Eastern. So if you go to exploringdrupal8.com, you can get the details there. I will remind you a few more times during the show to check that out. Also, we're going to start doing some Drupal tips, some quick tips to help you out with a few things. We're going to start with John giving us a tip about keeping a site alive.
So this is more not so much a Drupal tip, but it's a kind of performance enhancement tip for really any website. But we've been doing some performance testing on one of our sites, and one of the tools that we were using, which Jason mentioned on our image optimization show, told us that we should be keeping HTTP keep alive on our server. And we looked at it and we were like, well, why is it off? And there's really no reason. Hosting providers shut it off to save on resources, but the performance benefit really outweighs server resource usage. Basically what it does is it keeps a persistent connection between the user and the server, so that way data can transfer faster and the lookups are quicker. There's a time limit set, so it's not, anybody that's ever connected to your website is always going to be connected to it, but the time limit there limits how long that connection can be open for. But it's definitely helpful to have that turned on your server for performance reasons.
This is an Apache setting?
It is Apache web server setting. And you can actually, if you're in Drupal, if you're wondering if it's on or not, if you go into your status report and you look at your PHP settings, you can do a search for alive or keep alive, and you'll see it'll say HTTP keep alive, and it'll either be on or off, and then it'll give you kind of like a little time increment afterwards.
Cool.
Great, something worth taking a look at. Nick, you have a tip as well.
Yeah, so my tip is a little bit more in the Drupal interface, and it's pretty straightforward. Make sure you check every settings page. I had an issue a couple of weeks ago where I was creating a data export view, CSV, and I needed some HTML to be output. There was a field on the source site that was in some embed code, and so I needed the straight HTML to be output into the CSV so that the importing website could take that and utilize that correctly. I was going around in circles, having some difficulty getting it working. I even jumped on a call with you guys, and we still went around in circles a couple of times. You guys certainly put me on the right track, though. And soon after hanging up, I remembered that there was another settings page on the formatter, and down near the bottom, there's a little checkbox that says "Allow HTML in CSV," and it worked like a charm. And I had previously gone as far as writing a new template for the view in order to output that data correctly. And so it's sometimes important to remember that there's additional settings on that specific modules provide.
So part of the tip there is two other things too that I'm going to add to your tip as a sub-tips. One is, if you feel like this is something that everyone does all the time and it should be easy, it probably is. You just got to figure that out. And the second part of that tip is, man, if you can find a small circle of other Drupal developers that you can shoot quick questions to, it's always super helpful. I know the three of us do that all the time, and Jason included, that we use Hangouts and shoot each other a quick message and usually get an answer addressed pretty quickly. So having that inner circle, that inner network you can work with is great. I'm going to throw a tip out there, something that I've just started to use recently. If you're using PHP Storm as your editor, you can turn on a PHP code sniffer, which allows you to have PHP Storm on there inspect. I think it's the inspect command. Go through and take a look at your PHP code and give you tips of like variables that aren't used that are created. If you set it up with a link that's in our show notes about configuring it for Drupal, PHP Storm for Drupal, it will actually help you implement coding standards for comments as well. There's a great post. I think the post is called Setting Up PHP Storm for Drupal Coding Standards, and it walks you through how to set up all the indenting properly. And the one I love is just a commenting section where it doesn't only tell you for a function that, hey, you're missing the comments. There's a little button you can push there that it will insert it for you and let you fill in the details. So it's a great way to stay up on keeping your code nice and clean for Drupal. So take a look at it, and the link will be in the show notes.
I know what I'm doing when I get back from vacation.
What was that, John?
I just had a question. PHP Storm, that's a code editor, correct?
Yeah, IDE, yep.
Okay, cool. All right. Do you know if there's anything like that for Sublime?
No idea. I don't use Sublime.
Okay.
Yeah, I started using PHP Storm probably 2 years ago, and it has saved me so much time. It's worth the cost. It's not a free tool, but it's worth the couple $100 you have to spend for it.
Well, they've changed their pricing scheme actually, and I'm interested in. I don't quite understand how it is. I know it's a subscription now. Not a huge fan of having a subscription for my IDE rather than just having a tool that works. I use a similar tool from the same company, JetBrains. It's just PHP Storm doesn't work on Ubuntu, so right. But I use their Ubuntu.
It's the same tool, I think.
little more expensive, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So that's a tip from me. So let's talk about. Let's talk today about our topic, which is we're going back to views. We're calling this Views Revisited. And if you've listened to our views episode, which is one of our first ones, it's 2 years old now. It's episode 9. So talkingdrupal.com/009. We talk about views in that show. Today we thought we'd just revisit it again and hit a few additional things, maybe things that are maybe more advanced, and just spend a few minutes talking about the ways we're using views today. So why don't we start with formatters?
And so formatters are a key.
Hey, before you get on, I did have a note here that I wanted to bring up, the trivia question. So for those long-time Talking Drupal listeners, I ask you this question: how many hosts have there been for Talking Drupal? I'll give you a moment to think about that. And I know that anyone's been around a while is going to say, oh, yeah, it's not 3, it's 4. It was Steve, John, and Nick, and Jason. But actually, if you go back to episode 9, you'll hear a 5th voice there, my partner, Jay. So there have actually been, at one point in time, we had 5 hosts for Talking Drupal. So if the pattern keeps going, we should be down to 2 shortly, right?
No, I hope not.
Okay. Let's talk about formatters.
Yeah, so formatters are kind of a key part of views and how they work. Formatters, if you're looking at the views interface, are in the upper left-hand side, just under the title of the particular view. They are kind of the global how you're outputting the content of the view. By default, views comes with a couple of different formatters. Just taking a look, because I only ever use unformatted list from the default in the table. But it also comes with I believe a grid and an HTML list, and there may be one or two others. There are modules that will provide other formatters for you, and in order to kind of figure out why you would want that, you need to know what kind of content you're outputting. A couple of really common formatters that people use are like semantic views. Semantic views allows you to choose what the HTML structure of the view is. So for example, instead of outputting a div, you can output an article. Instead of having the striping rows be odd even, you can use custom classes, that kind of thing. Another really common formatter that people use is a calendar formatter. So it allows you to output, a typical calendar that shows the next month and puts the events on it. Another formatter that's pretty common that I was talking about in my tip today is, the data export, so the ability to output a CSV file or an XML file or, a JSON feed. So formatters have a couple of attributes, and they just allow you to take the data and exactly what it sounds like, format it in a specific manner.
I'd encourage people to take a look at Table. Table works really good for, I find I use it for admin interfaces where they need to, you're building some views for an admin side, and the nice thing about the tables is you can easily select columns to sort on. So if they're managing data, the table is a really good formatter to present content in a spreadsheet-like format for administrators to get access to.
Yeah, I think that's that's probably where I use tables most commonly as well, is with admin interfaces, and like you said, it's really good. And you can even do things like, I believe there's a helper module that would allow it to reprint the headers every so often. So it's just really easy to use, and you can control under that settings tab, which fields are sortable and which aren't, because not every column makes sense to be sortable.
And with a little bit of CSS, you can find some sample CSS out there to make those tables usable in a mobile interface too, pretty easily. So for responsive layouts, those tables just work fine. Works pretty good. So check that out. All right. So let's talk about a little bit about sorting.
Man, sorting's a good time. So when you start building your view, you can get all sorts of data back. Sometimes you want that sorted in a certain way. Views gives you the ability to do that. Using similarly to filters, we're going to talk about in a little bit. Sorting is basically selecting a field or part of the content that you're getting back to sort on. Commonly, views lets you sort on created date or published date out of the box. So anytime you create a new view, it's sorted by the created date. A lot of times, though, you want to sort by something else. You want to sort by a title. You want an alphabetical list. You can sort by title. You can also sort by weight. So if you have you have an instance where you have weighted content, you want to sort by that weight, you can do it. You also have the option of doing secondary sorts. So you have a primary sort, and then after that you add another sort, and it'll do a secondary sort. Nick, I think you actually had a really good instance of where you'd want to use a secondary sort.
Yeah, so for a pretty common example that I've seen is, you sort by, for example, date posted and then by author. So you can see, or by author and then by date posted, rather. So it gives you the ability to kind of have, if two things match, so say they were both released on the same day, you can then, see by author or by title, for example. That's a very common one as well. So you'll sort by date and then by title. So it'll show everything today, everything yesterday, and then alphabetical order after that. So that way, you're not looking through. Otherwise, it just pulls kind of a random. It just does it at random. If you have two that are posted on the same date, one time it might be one way, another time it might be another way, or it might not make sense to your users.
Yeah, it's that's a great example. Another one is sorting by date and then sorting by sticky at top. Getting a list of date-specific content or date-ordered content that is sticky at top of the list, which is something a lot of people do on their blogs.
And it's actually a little bit tricky, the order that you're sorting in. You always need to remember, the first sort is what you need first, and the second is second, which sounds obvious, but the example that you just mentioned, you would want the first sort to be sticky at top, because you want the ones that have that sticky value to be at the top, and then the second sort would be the date. So that way it would show all the ones that have sticky at the top, and then sort those by date, and then all the ones that don't have sticky at the top on the bottom, and then those sorted by date.
The other thing to think about too is ascending versus descending. That always confuses the heck out of me when I'm sorting something.
It's like a USB. I get it wrong the first two times every time, even though you can only have one or the other.
Like I'll sort stuff by date, and then I'll be like, oh, ascending, and then I'll be like, wait, no, I need the newest one first. It's descending. One other thing I wanted to bring up with sorting is draggable views. Draggable views is actually a great module that you can add on to views to allow users to sort views. So how that works is you basically create a view, and that view is the sorting view, and you give your user the ability to access that view and switch things around and save it. And then the view that the content you actually want sorted uses that view as its sort. So that way it'll always refer to that view and say, oh, this is the order they wanted in, and it'll do that. We actually use that for one of our clients with a shopping cart. They want their products in a specific order. So we put out the view with the shopping cart, and then the view checks the sort draggable view and then changes the order of the output. So it's really useful and a great module to add on to views.
Yeah, we use draggable views all the time as well. I mean, it's a great interface for customers in a situation where you don't want to give them an order field or some goofy way to sort things. You just give them, a visual interface to move things in the order they want them in. Yeah, it seems like to me like a must-have.
Yeah.
definitely. So then from sorting views, we're going to talk about filtering views, which is probably one of the biggest and most important features of views, because without filtering a view, you really just get all the results back.
And really probably a key piece here is contextual filters. So the idea would be if you build a single view to view something, I mean, you want to use that same view over and over in different circumstances depending on what content it's connected to. So let's say that you have, I'll give you a use case. So let's say you have information you want to share on a website. You have blog content, you have news content, you have tips and tricks content, and those are like sort of different categories of content, but they all sit in the same content type. You want to build one view that can display that particular type of content, and you just want to change the filter of it and display certain content on certain pages. Context filters allows you to pass in a filter from the outside of the view and filter that content on that key or that ID. Guys, got any other use cases there that might make more sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the three most common things that you're contextual filtering are based on who's currently logged in. So you might want to show, content that a user has created himself. So you're just saying, show this particular content based on whoever's logged in. And then every user that's logged in is going to see something different. The second most common is probably taxonomy. So kind of like you were saying, you have 4 or 5 different content types. They're all tagged with the same thing. You want to be able to see everything that's tagged with purple, for example. And the final thing is based on a particular node. So you want to show, you have maybe a product that has, a bunch of different things associated with it. If somebody's looking at that product page, based on that ID, you want to show a bunch of different things. So it's like you said, it's a way to kind of, based on who or how somebody is looking at something, give a different response.
Yeah, I've commonly used it in the past to create blocks. So, for example, a header image block, have that header image block display on every page, but then take the node ID for the node that it's on and pull a specific field from that node and display the page. Works pretty well for that. And I mean, that could pertain to any fieldable content you needed to display, really. Yeah, that's a great example.
You do have the ability with a contextual filter to do some, let's say you want to filter it on a node ID, and then you have the ability to say, if that node ID is not available, do this instead.
Yeah, exactly.
And the this instead there is an option to put PHP kind of code in there, and you could do some really interesting things. You could set the view based on session variables that are available to you, all kinds of stuff. So really, it gives the ability to make views extremely, extremely flexible, and write one view that will work in very, very many different circumstances.
And just a quick note, the contextual, so there's filters and then contextual filters. Filters is on the left-hand side near the bottom. Contextual filters are, by default, they're on the minimized advanced tab on the upper right-hand corner.
And the difference being the ones on the left, they call it filter criteria filters on the left-hand side, and those are really static. So they're things that don't change. They're not dynamic. Contextual filters are dynamic based on some circumstances.
Yeah, so the static ones, the two most common examples are whether or not something is published or not, or what content type you're looking at. So it's something that no matter who's looking at it, it doesn't change.
Right.
So what about some more complex filtering on the static side? What kind of options do we have there?
Yeah, so you have the ability to do groupings of filters, and often you'll need these kinds of things. So ands and ors, and grouping those things together. So you can have conditionals that say Show me content where it's this content type or this kind of content type and another set of criteria grouped together, and it's maybe this thing or this thing or this thing. So if you think of the ands and ors and really conditional grouping that you can put around those, the flexibility is in the filtering to do that.
Yeah, and one place where I think I've done this before is, for example, saying, I want you to show this particular piece if it's tagged with this taxonomy or it's this very specific node. So where you kind of have a node talking about a particular item and you want that to show up as well. Sometimes it's, but it's a different content type and it doesn't have a tag on it and you're not really able to add tags. It's worked out really well for me.
And a really nice interface for some complex filtering in there. So the interface allows you to create groups and then move things around very easily by dragging conditions between groups. So if it gets very complex, you get 6 or 7 conditions, it's very easy to use.
Yep. Definitely.
Okay, so is there anything else we want to say about filters?
Nope.
I don't think so. So let's talk about templates a little, John.
Yeah, templates in views are great as well. They allow you to basically modify the output of a view or a field in a view. Again, under that advanced section in views, if you could look down towards the bottom, it talks about templates and theming. And if you click on that link down at the bottom right-hand corner there, it'll actually show you a bunch of different templates that you can use to affect the different outputs of your views. And these outputs range from the wrappers of the whole view right down to the field level wrappers, even allowing you to manipulate the output, enter PHP in there and say like, hey, if this view is going to output this string, put an H1 around it, or do something special with it, or don't display it at all. So it kind of gives you the ability to put some code into your template and into your view, in addition to the other ways that we've mentioned, that will kind of do some advanced stuff. The most recent use for me was actually, again, using a view to pull information from a node using contextual filter. We needed to output some JavaScript on a page. It was going to load an external review service. And what we did is the field within the node had the ID for that product in it. And in the that field's template file, we actually dropped the JavaScript in there and let it run when the view was built. So the ID was part of the JavaScript, and the JavaScript ran when the view was being processed. So works out really nicely, and it allows you to get a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more power over how your views are being output.
Absolutely. And this could be a tip in itself. Don't ever forget that you can see what the view template names could be just by looking at the advanced tab, instead of being like me and installing Devel Themer and clicking around and figuring it out that way.
So that's actually a great point to bring up. Those names, the way that they're structured can be a little bit confusing on that tab. So if you're looking at that tab, you'll actually see a comma-separated list of file names. And depending on what you're doing with your view, depends on which file name you want to use. So the first one in the list is usually the most general template name. As you go down the list, they get more and more specific. So you want to be sure that if you're using a couple of different views templates on the same view, for example, with fields, you have multiple fields, you want to make sure you get real specific to that specific field that you're using, because you'll start to see conflict in some areas if you're using a really general field view template or a view field template.
Yeah, and they allow, it's just like templates in general in Drupal. It allows you to, you can target the general view, you can target a specific display, you can target a specific field, and it kind of goes down the rabbit hole from there. So
We get a little glitch here. I can't hear anything.
okay. I think
we're
that's.
good.
You hear me
No, we're
now?
good. Yeah. Okay. I think I stuttered there for a minute. So I might edit that out. I might not. So I want to remind everyone too that if you have any additional comments on what we're talking about today with views, some additional tips, maybe some Drupal tips or some Drupal questions, you can always email us at talkingdrupal@gmail.com, and now we have a voicemail number. So if you leave a voicemail there, we will play the voicemail during the show and answer your question or comment on your tip. So that number is 401-400-2004. So 401-400-2004. Pretty easy number to remember. So rush out there and be the first person to leave us a voicemail, and we'll get it on the next show. And John, Nick, that doesn't include you.
If you've recently started listening to the Lullabot podcast again, they have a phone number, and I will tell you, if you call us and it's funny, we'll add it to the show without a doubt.
Okay.
Because there's some quality call-ins there. The Drupal community, very creative.
So I'm glad to hear you mentioned the Lullabot podcast is back up, huh?
It is back up and running.
How long has it been back online? Because I unsubscribed to it probably 4 months ago.
4 or 5 weeks now, maybe.
Oh, it's 4 or 5 weeks. Okay, that's good. Same name?
Yep, same feed.
Great. I'll have to add that back into my my podcast list. So let's wrap this up with 2 more topics here. We only have a few more minutes. Let's go to relationships.
And so relationships are something that kind of confused me at first when I was working with views way back when.
I'm not talking about Tinder either.
Absolutely not. So relationships, again, are under the advanced tab, and they take a little bit of getting used to if you don't quite understand what they're doing underneath. What relationships do essentially is give you access to other entities or other pieces of content. Under the hood, that means they're basically just doing a join, or I believe a left join, on another table. In kind of Drupal words, what that means is if you're looking at a view of a node, a type of content, and you decide that you want to display the user, the author's picture, you would use a relationship. So basically, you're saying, I want to take everything that's related to the author, and I want to add that and make it available to this view. Another type of thing where that can be a case is, with products and commerce, you generally have a product entity, and it has a title, it has a price, and a couple other things. And then you have a product display node, and that has a title, some information maybe, and then a reference to the product. So if you're creating a view where you're showing those product displays, you would want to create a relationship to the product entity. And then you would use that, for example, you would say on the view, you would say, I want to add the title. Well, then you have to decide whether or not you're showing the title of the product or you're showing the title of the node. So if you just chose title and said no relationship, that's going to be the node. If you said title uses relationship to the product, it's going to show the product title. So it really just gives you access to internal items. And you can nest them. You can go, pretty far down the chain. So, for example, you could say, a common use case, or maybe not a common use case, but something that you might do is you have a blog post. You have an author on that post, and then the author has a list of products that they recommend. So you might say, okay, on this view, it's a view of the post, and I want to grab the picture of the author, and then I want to grab the picture of the product that they're recommending that's on that entity reference or the product reference. So you create first a relationship to the author, then you create a relationship to the product that's using the author relationship. And so you're kind of going a couple levels deep. And you can go as deep as you want, as far down as you need to go. The real, you can have as deep a relationship as you want. Okay, bad jokes.
Yes.
The only thing to really be aware of, though, is relationships do have some performance implications. The more that you have, the slower the view is going to be.
I wouldn't concern. I mean, I wouldn't use that as a warning to anyone. To be honest, I mean, I don't think that's something to be careful of. I mean, in a site that's bigger than a few content types, you're going to have relationships, and if you don't, it might be an indication that you need to rethink how you're structuring some of your content types.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's typically, you're not going to see a problem until you have 4 or 5, 6 relationships. It's not typically the problem. It's just something to be aware of.
And what we're really talking about here, for people coming from other programming backgrounds, we're doing SQL joins on the tables, which is already happening because of the way the Drupal database is set up. But if conceptually, you can think about it as joining an order table to an order line table kind of thing.
Exactly. Pretty straightforward.
All right, so let's.
There's so many good relationship jokes to be made in that short period of time. I just wanted to piggyback. I think Nick had a great example there of relationships with products. I tend to use relationships and products when working on e-commerce stores quite frequently because there's always some sort of data that you need from either the product itself or reversed the product display that you just have to get. It's really interesting the first couple times you do or use a relationship, you'll actually notice that your available fields list gets so much bigger because you'll drop a product in there and you'll see like, oh, all of these fields are now available to me to filter on or to use as output and so on and so forth. So, again, from the SQL side, you're really just doing a join, but it gives you a lot more options, a lot more flexibility.
Definitely.
So let's touch on a couple of Drupal 8 things, which would probably become a normal section for any shows we're doing moving forward. Is how does the topic we're talking about relate to Drupal 8? So I've been doing some work in Drupal 8, and there's a few things that jumped out to me. This is not an exhaustive list of what's different in views, but there's two real obvious ones to me. One is the most awesome feature of views that I've seen and always wanted was the ability to duplicate a display as a different type. So we're all familiar in Drupal 7 where you've built a block display, and then maybe you want to create a page display, or you've built a page display and you want to build a block display that's exactly the same, but you can't really copy it and change it unless you get real creative with export and import, which I've done in the past. Yeah. But today in Drupal 8, when you have a display on a view, and let's say it's a page display, you can say I want to duplicate this as another display type, and it will copy all of that view definition into the new display.
Very handy. It's one of the things I was most excited about as well.
Yeah. So like in a straight Drupal 8 install, I'm looking right now at the page, I can duplicate a page as another page, as an attachment, as a block, as an embed, as an entity reference, or as a feed. Just those are the things I can create right from out of the box. Pretty interesting. The other thing that I want to mention is that there is no import and export.
I had noticed that
in the views page. Now there's a reason for that, and I'm not sure that I love the reason, but because it doesn't quite work now. So I think this is a gap that needs to be filled. But in Drupal 7, you could go to a view either at the display level, or is it always at the view level? Actually, it's always at the view level. You can take a view, an entire view, and you can say export it. You can copy that code, take it to another website, and import it. As long as your dependencies are there, like the content type fields all match, you will import that view. That's gone in Drupal 8 right now. So you're left with using configuration management. So you can certainly go into configuration management and say I want to export this view, and you do this very similar thing in terms of you do a copy, and then you can go into another database and do a paste. But there's one caveat there. You guys know what that is?
No.
Huge caveat. The databases have to be the same, from the same source database. I can't take it from website A and bring it to website B, because configuration management is about taking things in the same database from development to staging to live.
So when you say the same database, you mean the same like root database? So like
exactly.
Theoretically, there's a site ID somewhere. It has to be the same site ID from dev to stage to production.
Yeah, so the only way CMI works is if I started with one database, let's say it was in dev, and then I created a staging database from it and then a live database from the same source database. Then this site ID, I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but it's a UUID that matches the databases up, and you can't move CMI between those things unless all those things match.
So let me ask you this: Could you get the YAML file? Because I'm assuming it's exporting a YAML file. Could you go into the YAML file and just monkey around with that to be able to import it to whatever site you wanted to?
I believe you can, and I tried that probably about a year ago and haven't tried that again. You probably can do something like that. Which seems sort of counterintuitive to what the tools are giving you. So I'm working on a project right now, and the CMI is working pretty well. I mean, I'm able to move stuff back and forth. Not the vision that I initially had for how this would work a year ago, but it is working well. But the key is to have all those databases from the same source initially. So, which is kind of a bummer when you're looking at just kind of getting things running quickly. Before you could, in Drupal 7, you could just do the export and import. As long as the dependencies were there, it would work fine, and that just doesn't exist anymore, unless there's going to be a contrib module that someone creates to do that.
Yeah, and I'm sure that'll be one of the first things either added to features or a separate contrib module.
Right.
And if you want to help with that, there's a global Drupal sprint coming up at the end of the month. January 30th and 31st. So, and they'll be focusing on contrib.
Nick, could you throw a URL for that in the show notes?
Yeah, I can put one together. I know the Boston one is going to be hosted at Genuine Interactive. I don't know the hours, but I know that they're talking about providing brunch on Sunday if you show up.
Do you know the date?
January 30th and 31st.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay, so let's go on to the module of the week.
Okay, so the module of the week this week is File Checker. So if our show last week had come out instead of being unfortunately cut short from technical difficulties, you would have heard my recommendation not to use a small orange anymore. They had a fairly significant, or the most significant downtime I've ever seen. There's a couple of servers were down for about 6 weeks, 6 days or so, which of course in hosting isn't really acceptable. So moving a lot of those clients from backups, we had a couple.
I'd say it wasn't acceptable at all.
Oh yeah, definitely not acceptable, 100%. I'm trying to be nicer than I was feeling last week. But I certainly had backups of all my clients' websites and files and stuff, so I was able to move that over. But for one of the clients, there were a couple files that they had put on the site, that morning and the day before that were missing. So I was able to find a little module called File Checker. It's very easy to install. There's a very simple admin. You click a button and it runs through and checks all the files and says, hey, these files are missing, and it shows everything from the original files all the way down to the generated files. So if you're using something like the insert module to insert images into text, it'll tell you that those are missing as well. So if you have a site that has any level of complexity, you can very quickly just go through and see, hey, these files are the ones that we need to upload and take care of. So
what is it? I'm not understanding this. What is it comparing it against to know something's missing?
So it just looks at the database, the files in the database, and then tries to reach them. And if they don't exist,
I see what you're saying.
So it's all the files that are forward. It doesn't deal with pages. like that, just files.
Does it look at and you just said this, but I'm just going to double check. It's looking at inserted images in a body field or a text field?
Yeah, it'll find those as well because it knows that this
Okay.
particular image has been generated, like the medium thumbnail, whatever, has
Okay.
been generated, but it doesn't exist. So it doesn't know specifically like this page has something inserted, but it knows that that generated file doesn't exist anymore. So if you replace all those generated files as well, it'll work.
Nick, so it's not looking at your files directory, it's looking at the database entry?
Exactly. So it compares the two. So it's good for moving environments, or a deploy gone wrong or something like that. And you can set up to run in cron. So it's a very good module.
You may have already said this, but does it have a synchronization capability?
I don't believe so.
Oh, okay.
What would it synchronize from? If it's
well,
missing?
Okay, fair enough. I guess that's true. I was kind of envisioning like a check between dev and staging or dev and production, that sort of thing.
So there is a tool to use that right now. We're going into a module I think that we've already mentioned in the past, but it's probably a good time to bring it up, right? So, and I'm trying to. Is it file proxy, stage file proxy,
yeah,
file proxy
file
stage?
Proxy.
What is it?
Stage file proxy.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about it in the past, so you could look up on the site what it is. But it's a great tool for if you have a production environment and a dev environment. You can set this tool up so you don't have to copy all your file directory down to your dev environment. When the file goes to get displayed, if it's not on the dev server, it will look to the URL on the live server and pull it down for you. So it's a great tool for that situation. Kind of, I think this is maybe what John was getting to with his last question, kind of. So I think we've talked about that in a previous show. You can check that out. And I think we've come to the end of our day. I want to remind everyone that we are having a webinar on January 12th and then one again on the 19th. So we got 2 days. And this is all related to Drupal 8 stuff that we did with Mike and Nick from Sego Solutions. We put out a 6-part audio series that came into your Talking Drupal feed. If you go to exploringdrupal8.com, you'll see the links to the shows, specific shows that we did related to Drupal 8. There are 6 audio shows, and now we're having 2 webinars on the 12th and the 19th.
So next week.
What?
So next week.
Yeah. Yep. Next week doesn't. It all depends on when you're listening to this. So, so it's January 12th and January 19th, which as of today happens to be next week. And you can sign up right online for those and join us for those days. We have a number of sign-ups already, so there's going to be a boatload of people on the webinars. And this is really it's going to be a webinar and really a open Q&A. So if you have questions about Drupal 8, either in the front-end site-building side, which we'll be covering on the 12th, and on the 19th we're going to be covering module development side of Drupal 8. You got questions in those 2 categories, jump on that call and ask your questions those days.
Definitely.
And you can sign up at exploringdrupal8.com. And again, if you have any questions, you have some comments about the show, you want to share some feedback, you can leave us a voicemail at 401-400-2004. And I think we're going to call that a wrap. John, how can people find you online or get in touch with you?
Oh, man. You can find me on all the social networks at John Bacozzi. You can also find me at Drupal PVD on January 19th. Side note there, Nick from Sego Solutions is going to be calling in and giving us a lightning talk on something in Drupal 8. So I think he's going to be talking about theming. So if you're in the Providence area and you want to stop by the Think offices, we'll be here. We'll be having a good time. We also have Steven talking about some Drupal 8 stuff and a couple other people talking about some things. So really excited about that. And as always, you can find me at think.com.
Great. Thanks, John. How about you, Nick?
You can find me online.
Nick from, let's just make sure we're clear, Nick from Enlightened Development. Nick has just recently changed his company name.
That's right. So you can find me online at Dixman, and you can email me at nick@enlighteneddevelopment.com. So it's now Enlightened Development LLC.
Excellent. And I'm Stephen Cross. You can find me on Twitter at Stephen Cross with a PH, or you can find me at parallaxinfotech.com and talk to you guys. Let's see. We got a show in 2 weeks. 3 weeks, right? Didn't we do a little schedule change?
Yeah, I think it might be 3 weeks.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out. And anyway, you can chat with all three of us next Tuesday online, live, 12 p.m., exploringdrupal.com. Take care, guys.
See you next week.
Have a good one.